Hey guys, welcome back to True-Moto-Resto. I thought I'd do a quick video this morning of my 2017 Africa Twin. Just kind of show a little bit more detail on what I've done to the bike. It's not much more than stock, a few little things, but I thought since I had it out getting ready to just give it a quick check over before the first ride of the season, I thought I'd just show you what I've added to the bike. So the first thing I did when I got the bike was added these engine guards and crash bars. These ones are from Outback Motor Deck, and I bought, I guess there's 3 pieces you can buy. I did not buy the top section. I bought the engine guards, which are these ones down below, and I bought the upper crash bars, the ones up top. Generally speaking, I'd say they're good quality item. The finish on them is very good. They look great, and they were pretty simple to install. There's lots of videos online from Outback Motor Deck on how to install them. The only difference I found in the installation was when they tell you to put it together loose so you can fit it all, and then kind of go back after the fact and tighten everything up. I didn't have anywhere near the loose fit that they had in their video. So it did not give me much room to make any sort of adjustments. As far as gripes with this particular kit goes, I would say a couple of little things. I did have to I mean, you don't have to put this back on, they say, but if you don't, it looks like hell in my opinion. There's wires that showing here, so I did have to modify this DCT motor cover right here. If you can see it here, I'll show you. I had to cut it to fit underneath the Outback Motor Deck clamp here. So it still looks good, and because I'm a little OCD, I did actually buy a brand new one of these, so if I ever take these off for any reason, I still have one of these guys, all original, to go back on the bike. And aside from that, I would say the clearance can be a little bit of an issue on these, I found, although they say, and I say they, Outback Motor Deck would say that it's not a huge deal and not to worry about it. But on this upper crash bar, this is a DCT model bike. I'm not sure if it's the same on the standard bike, but there's a pipe right here. It's a stock pipe. I don't know what's in there, to be honest with you. Probably coolant. And the distance between this part of the crash bar and this coolant pipe is maybe 1 millimeter or less. When I first put these on, it was touching, so I contacted the guys where I bought this, and they actually sent me some new bars, and it actually created about 1 millimeter, maybe a little less than 1 millimeter of a gap when I got the new bars here, which was good. And I put a little piece of rubber inner tube in between the two there, because I didn't want this bar kind of chafing on this coolant pipe and kind of chewing through it at some point and losing all my coolant. So I did that. And then somebody else that I saw on one of the forums had asked me if I had any clearance issues down here, and I said no, I don't, but it is awful close. I don't know if you can see where my finger is pointing there, where this bar has a bracket that attaches right down in here. You can see the tip of my finger. It is super close. It doesn't touch. It sits just behind this cover, so it's not touching anything, so it's okay, but it's very close. And I know that another person on one of the forums had issues with their clearances, and it was actually touching either the engine case or the cover, one or the other. There are adjustments. Again, you can loosen it off a little bit, but I just found it was a real tight fit in some of those places. So what else did I do to the bike? This is an Outback Motor Deck rear rack that I put on here. Again, pretty well made item. It's pretty sturdy. However, I did have issues again mounting this. You can see up in here, there are bolts that come through from the top, nuts that go on there, and then there's very large washers to
to spread the load. You can see up in there, there's the washers in there. And I can't remember now whether it was on the I think it was on these forward ones here. You can see how this is the stock rear racking, and it kind of forms a bit of a triangular shape here. And the washers provided by Outback Motor Deck didn't fit inside this area, so I had to grind the edges down to fit inside this triangular area. And once I did that, it was fine. And there was also, I found these they were barely with the spacers that they ask you to put on there. Those are barely long enough, those bolts, to catch the nylon locking ring in the lock nuts. So I did end up putting a little bit of blue Loctite on there just to keep them secure. So that was, I mean, it's a quality item. It's very sturdy. It looks great. They just fell a little bit short on the hardware side of things, but it was fairly easy to remedy. The next thing I put on here was this is a stock windshield, but I have this is called a Batzen screen adjuster. So you can loosen these little screw attachments here and then move the screen up or down depending on how high or low you want it. It works really well. It's exceptionally well built. A guy in Germany builds them and sells them, and they're well worth the money. And then I bought a Camel windshield brace, because I guess these earlier bikes have issues with cracking of the welds on the windshield mount, so I put one of those on, and that seems to be working well. And then aside from that, I put on this Camel adventure stand as well, because being such a tall bike, I found that you know, I'm not as young as I used to be, so getting your leg over the back of this thing and swinging, especially if you've got a little bag on the back, swinging your leg over and getting off the bike is a little harder if you're standing on the ground. So it's a lot easier if you can stand on the foot peg to do that. And the stock stand tends to flex quite a bit, and I've heard of a few guys who have bent or snapped the side stand. But so I thought, well, for the money, let's be safe, and that way I can feel a bit more comfortable and confident mounting from standing on the peg and swinging my leg over the bike. And then other than that, I put on this center stand. This is an OEM Honda center stand, and it is very simple to fit, with the exception of mounting those springs there. You can get one spring on, not too bad, but pulling that second spring, holy cow, that was not easy. And I know a lot of guys have had success, really simple, using a screwdriver to leverage and to slip it on. I don't know what they were doing, but I couldn't get that to work for me. So I actually rigged up, I've got a spring pulling hook that I use on the snowmobile exhaust, and I tied a piece of paracord to it, and then on the end of the paracord I made a loop, and I put a piece of metal tubing in the loop, so it was like a foot stirrup. And then I tied one end to the handle on my spring puller, and I put the other end on my foot, and then I just used the power of my leg to stretch that spring out and hook it on there. Maybe I'll show you that at some point. So there you go. Those are the mods that I've made to the bike, and yeah, overall not too bad. I think the only other thing I would say is it's a big pain in the backside if you got to change the battery. So I just changed the battery on this bike at the end of the winter, because it was the original one, and being a DCT, if the battery dies on it, you're not going anywhere. You can't bump start it or anything like that. So the battery's in behind this toolbox, and while you can get the toolbox off with these bars on, you can't get the battery out. So I had to take off this side of the Outback Motor Deck crash bar to get into to take the battery off. But so that's a bit of a pain in the backside, but aside from that, not too bad.
So the other thing I did to this bike, not really a modification, but more of a fix is, last year I'd had the bike maybe a month or two, and it would start right up, and then after about 10 seconds it would just shut off. And then I'd start the bike up, it would run for 10 seconds and then shut off, and then I'd try it again and it would finally stay going. So I was on the forums, and it turns out to be this switchgear. And I'm one of those guys that was always just using the key to shut the bike off. I never ever used this to turn the bike off. I just used the starter button, but I never used it to actually shut the bike off. And I guess there's corrosion that builds up inside there from sitting around or from lack of use and so on. So the fix for that was relatively simple. I just took the switchgear apart. So there's a screw down here, I'm on there. You'd have to loosen off some of this stuff to be able to get at those screws properly. But then this comes apart fairly easily. And the best thing to do is there's actually a couple of screws inside here. You take those off, and you can take the part of the switch out of the back and the inside. Be careful, there's a little spring in there, you don't want to lose it. And then I sprayed a bunch of electrical contact cleaner in there, and then rocked this back and forth. And then I used some dielectric grease in there. Now if you can use a spray dielectric grease, that's even better. It gets in there a lot better. And then since then it's been okay, so we'll find out shortly, probably later today, how it's been after sitting over the winter. But every time I pop into the garage, which is almost every day, I just give this thing a couple of rocks so I don't get any more corrosion building up on it. So hopefully it's all good again this year. And aside from that, the only thing I really got to double check is the tire pressures, and she should be good to go because I did the oil change at the end of the season last year. So she's clean and she's ready to ride, apart from checking the tires. Okay guys, so this is the setup that I used to stretch the spring for the center stand on the Africa Twin. So those springs, as I said, are very hard to stretch by hand. So I have this spring hook, which works really well on snowmobile exhaust and exhaust springs and that kind of stuff on sport bikes. But even pulling on this, it was pretty much impossible to pull by hand. I certainly wasn't strong enough to stretch those springs onto the center stand. So what I did was I took this piece of paracord, and I made a loop at one end, put a piece of metal tubing on it. So this basically becomes the foot stirrup. So imagine your foot goes in there like that. And then this end I tied at the appropriate length to the spring hook. And then you probably want it a bit shorter than you think, because the actual paracord does stretch, and it stretches an incredible amount given the tension that spring is under. So I had to shorten it a couple of times to get it to the right length, but you got a lot more strength pushing your leg like this to stretch that that spring than you can get out of your hands and your arms. So give that a try if you have one of these kicking around, or you can rig something up. But I would only say to just be careful when you're laying on the ground underneath the bike and you're pulling that hard with your leg. Make sure you have somebody there to help you in the act of steadying the bike. You want somebody holding that bike, because last thing you want to have is it coming down on top of you when you're putting all that pressure with your foot on that spring. So you got to be safe while you're doing it.